Canada, as you can see, is still the most penetrated online universe in the world from home and work. So what we see is, on average, on a monthly basis, 72% of Canadians use the web on a monthly basis. When you compare that to our friends in the US, you can see that about 61% of their population is online on a monthly basis. So more than 10% more of our population is online than any other country in the world. And that just talks a lot to the breadth of data that we have. Because when you're going to see in the next chart, Canada also leads the world in terms of pages viewed. So on average, an average Canadian looks at over 4,000 pages over the period of the month, and that's a whole lot of pages. Why the variance in the spend in Canada? So here, when we look at the blue bar, this is the percentage of time spent. So 21% of all time spent with media is online. But when you look at advertising budgets, what we see is that in this country, only 7% of all ad budgets are spent online. So there is a large variance in the way that the consumer is engaged versus the way that the advertisers are engaged. On a monthly basis, about 84.3% of all Canadians use a social networking site over the period of the month. And these are the real staggering stats right here, which I think are, in my mind, eye-opening. An average Canadian spends about 6 hours on a monthly basis entrenched with social networking, and looks at 828 pages on a monthly basis. And we'll see the reason why in a few moments, but when you just think about this and compare it to the rest of the world, it's actually, we stand out like a sore tooth. Almost 270 million actual visitors worldwide to YouTube, spending an average of 1.6 hours on the site. When you look at Canada, it's a way different story. So when you think about Canada, Canadians spend over 3 hours a month on YouTube, looking at 68 different videos, and YouTube accounts for 46% of all videos in this country.
This change is summed up by Wenda Harris-Millard, who's the president of the media group at Martha Stewart Living on the Media. Just 3 months ago, she said the media world has changed more in the last 5 years than it has in the last 50, and it will change at that rate again in the next 5. The largest force shaping 2008 will be steady flow of readers, viewers, and users away from traditional media to digital options of all kinds. Accustomed to this idea that there are maybe a few thousand people in the world who tell us what we can all know, the editors and the television producers, and that the dynamics have changed now so that there are many millions of people now who can tell us what they think we should know. And in many cases, they have credibility and influence that is vastly greater than their numbers. Finally, the long tail, you're going to hear from Chris Henderson today. Long tail is a very powerful concept. The idea that many businesses, many niches now, special interests, are marketable online that would not have been marketable before there was online. eBay being the best example of that. I mean, many people can make their living on eBay or make a nice income on eBay selling things that they could never sell in a storefront because it would not be economically feasible to sell it in a storefront. But if you sell Civil War memorabilia, you can find a market for it in eBay, even though that business could never have existed before there was an eBay. The same thing applies to information. In Web 1.0, the first decade of the web, it was co-opted by large media organizations that had the capacity and the power to run expensive websites. In Web 2.0, the economic barriers have fallen. And now it's possible for anyone in this room to start and run a website that you may do just for satisfaction. You may do it just for community. But gathering together that group of people who share the passions that you do is satisfying enough, even if you don't make any money at it. In many industries, the number of active bloggers who are really sticking to it and making an impact on the market, it can be counted on your fingers and toes. So I think the challenge is to find the people who really matter, who are really creating centers of influence, and monitor those. And don't worry about the 35 million or the 190 million, whatever number you want to believe, because most of them are irrelevant to you.
I think that when you've got a positive message that you're trying to get out there or trying to seed, I think that you can kind of identify the influencers, and there's a core group of people that you can focus on to get that positive message out. But when it's a negative message that's coming back, it's the same as what Paul Gillin was saying, that nobody knows if they're I forget the term, but like a high-end customer or a low-end customer.
But you got to be real careful. Like even identifying the influencers. Most corporations don't know how to handle that. Unless you understand the sophistication of what these influencers need, what they want, and how they want to be engaged in, you're in trouble, right? And so that's another thing too. So just identifying those influencers isn't enough. Well, it's understanding how to shake their hand.
And I think it also raises another subtext that goes amongst the jargon and language that's used in this sector, and that it's not just about listening, it's about understanding. Yeah. And to understand, you need more than 2 part-timers, right? This gets back into the cultural shift that it's not about having a department of communicators who understand, it's about your entire organization understanding. And all of them having their ears and antenna tuned out to the world, so any part of your organization can be a gateway for you to get feedback from all the different constituents that you're dealing with.
We have a client that meets, they call it the War Room. They meet once a week now, based on the internet, and each of them has a responsibility to do something, and they bring it in, they discuss it, and then there's an action item from there. And I just thought that was really smart of them to do. And they're uncomfortable, but more importantly, the learning for them is paramount, and not necessarily the backlash of.
First of all, you need to determine if there's actually people out there in the social media, social networking space who are your community to begin with. So it's finding out, who in your space is already out there. Are there groups of media planners on Facebook? Friggin' hope not, but perhaps there are. Look at the advertising sites like AdRants, like some of the other ones that are out there, and you can sort of piece together through who's responding to blogs, who's joining groups, who's blogging themselves about the industry, who's writing about the kind of things that you're writing about, a framework of people that you might start to interact with. But the very first thing you want to do is try to find out who these people are. So the monitoring aspect, the online research, the subscribing to feeds, subscribing to Google Alerts, all those things will give you a bit of intelligence that you can then analyze and determine who your community is.
Technologists are the last people to tell you what technology is for. Technologists have one job, and that job is to make technology cheap, easy, and ubiquitous, so that we can figure out what technology is for, and we can tell them. Because we know our world, we know our needs, and everybody's different. This is the long tail of sort of applications. They can't anticipate. All they can do is follow the technology trends and put the technology in our hands, so we can figure out what to do with it. So that's what Carver Mead's imperative led to. He said waste transistors, and people thought outside the box, and they said we're going to waste transistors on doing something that the IT establishment would consider frivolous and trivial and silly. Eye candy. And it changed the world. So that's one technology. That's processing is now too cheap to meter. The psychology of free is actually really poorly understood. Sometimes people associate free with poor quality, and sometimes they don't. And it really depends on where they're coming from. The point is that when something went from paid to free, people tend to think there's a proportional decline in quality. Whereas something has always been free, they don't apply the same rules. So no one thinks less of Google because it's free, right? Because search has always been free. And so the question is really, if you're in a business where you're selling a product, how do you sort of divorce the consumer expectations of where you were and start something new that's got a blank slate?